Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How Do We Stay Grounded When the Ground is Moving? My name is Lauren Blair, and I am the Provider and Community Relations Manager at Coastal Hospice. Welcome to our Caregiver Academy. We're excited that you are joining us today. Among our attendees today, we are happy to see so many familiar organizations with us. We have colleagues from Coastal Hospice, we have Tidal Health, MAC, Genesis, Peninsula Home Care, Worcester County Commission on Aging, Visiting Angels, Care Patrol, Worcester County Adult Medical Day Services, and so many more. It's wonderful to see you all on today. Before we begin, allow me to go over a few housekeeping items. My role today is to help facilitate and handle all the behind-the-scenes logistics of the webinar. You may see myself or my colleague Alejandra pop up in the chat box to address or help with any technical issues. I want to thank you for your patience ahead of time in case we should have any. I'll also come back in at the end to discuss the program evaluation. We ask that you set aside other devices or work for the next hour. We are sure you will enjoy our program today. To make this interactive, we may ask you some questions from time to time. We will be using the chat feature to communicate with you throughout the webinar. You can access it by clicking on the messaging icon in your meeting controls. When you send a message, please be sure to select all panelists and attendees in the to box so that we can all see your comment or question. Today's webinar will be moderated by Monica Escalante, President of Coastal Hospice, and we have invited 4 panelists to join us to discuss how can we adapt to this new normal. Monica has more than 20 years of experience in end-of-life care. She is a board member of the Hospice Network of Maryland and a diversity advisory board member of the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. Monica, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you very much, Lauren, and thank you for that kind introduction. It's very exciting for me to present a panel for our first webinar of the Coastal Caregiver Academy. And we have wonderful presenters, and I'm going to ask them to turn on their videos as I introduce them. I'm going to start with Reverend Joel Byler, who is an ordained elder in the Church of the Nazarene and has been a chaplain for Coastal Hospice for 4 years. He is originally from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and he loves being with people, and our patients and family at Coastal Hospice absolutely love being with him. Our second presenter and panelist here is Robert Miller. Robert Miller is the Chief Operating Officer at Coastal Hospice. Bob, as we call him, has a master's in divinity and intensive in counseling. He served at the Eisen Healthcare in Philadelphia as a trauma counselor. Bob is a certified facilitator for the grief recovery method. He began his career at Coastal Hospice 8 years ago as a chaplain and as a bereavement counselor. Thank you for being with us, Bob. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Reverend Sharon Hutchinson, who has been employed at Coastal Hospice for over 17 years. She started as a chaplain and a spiritual counselor, and most recently became the manager of the spiritual care team. Sharon earned a degree in philosophy and religion from Bridgewater College, followed by a master's in divinity from Bethany Theological Seminary in Oak Brook, Illinois. She is also a certified in thanatology and has a certificate in palliative chaplaincy through California State University. Thank you, Sharon. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. And last but not least, I want to introduce Reverend Howard Travers. Howard is an ordained minister who has been employed by Coastal Hospice for over 27 years. He received a dual master's degree in theological studies and in divinity from Southwestern Assemblies of God University in Waxahachie, Texas. At present, he's a certified thanatologist. And for some reason, I don't see him on video, but I'm going to let Alejandra and Lauren deal with that. So our goal for our webinar today and over 50 people register, and I see more people are coming. We're starting right on time, so I hope there'll be a recording of this webinar that we're going to send to all participants. So if for some reason other people come in later, they will have access to this recording. So the pandemic has changed the rules of so much that is going around us, and we're finding it hard to adapt to the new normal. So our goals for today is to provide practical tools, things that clinicians that are serving patients in different ways and are serving people in the community can utilize to feel more grounded when the ground seems to be moving. We're missing closeness, we're missing intimacy. We are in the great adaptation. And I'm going to invite Reverend Baylor to help us with this idea of the COVID roundabout. Turn it to you, Joel.
Thank you, Monica, and welcome to all of you joining us today. Thank you for all that you do in our community. And we are just privileged to come alongside of you for these moments and to validate some of the feelings that we all have. It doesn't matter what job we have, what organization we're a part of. We have been through tremendous change in this last year and a half with COVID and some of the things that we'll be talking about today. And one of the clearest images is a roundabout that I have come across over these months and talking with people about it. And there's not really a magic part of this, as you see in this magic roundabout, a concept of roundabouts upon roundabouts to go to certain places and certain directions. And that's kind of how we feel. Sometimes we get onto a roundabout and we go around several times and we're not sure which exit to take or which direction to go on. We don't know whether to head off to one town or head off to somewhere else. And our feelings can ebb and flow even in a given day. Some days we are feeling like we're doing okay in this process, and other days we have no idea what we're doing. Some days the roads are straight ahead, like part of the right side of that image. And then other days, like the left side of the image, you've got more roundabouts and more arrows and more directions than we can even begin to contemplate or imagine. And that's part of this roundabout. Here is a roundabout with two roundabouts. And the important image that I want to point out in this picture is in the lower right-hand corner, the word yield. And if you look at this image, you see cars coming from all directions. You see cars leaving from all directions. And I want to remind us today that in the midst of the feelings that you have, the feelings that I have, the feelings that we all have in this process, that yielding right of way is the best way to help one another. And we mean that, and I mean that by looking at this image and understanding that in COVID, we have all been asking those questions. Do we mask? Do we not mask? Do we lock down? Do we not lock down? Do we vaccinate or not vaccinate? And on the bottom right hand of that image, you see those words, and we are always, and all of us, using words like conspiracy or chaos or community and caution. But I point to the upper right-hand corner and want to point you to those words that say rights and responsibilities. And as organizations and in our community and with those that you work with every day, or maybe those people that you rub shoulders with every day, maybe in your neighborhoods or at Food Lion or Walmart or any of the places you go, just recognize that we all are processing and experiencing this chaos. And the roundabout is very, very a very inapt picture because it describes the fact that we are all in this together. So where do we go from here? We have to be aware that there's a wide variety of thoughts and opinions about all of this. We respect individuals and families and coworkers and staff and employees and employers. in this process. And we also here, a year and a half into this process, we need to acknowledge that we have been here before, because this was all new to us in March of 2020, but yet we haven't been this way before. And that yielding to the other while at the same time protecting one another is the critical part. And I think one of the words that has come up for us as a panel, as we've talked about this over these months, is that word compassion, is just having compassion for where someone else is in this process. And it's about validating our own feelings and our own thoughts and our own emotions on a daily basis. But it's also about understanding that everyone else is somewhere in that process as well. And I've enjoyed talking with this panel over these months. And you're going to get some great benefit and help in these sessions today from these colleagues of mine in insightful ways, things that they have been learning and processing and teaching for decades of their lives. And we just thank you for being a part of this with us today as we talk about how we stay grounded when this ground is moving.
And for the audience, I want to invite you to use the chat box to communicate with us. We want to make this as interactive as possible. And Joel, you mentioned that we have to be compassionate. And one of the things that comes to my mind whenever we talk about compassion is self-compassion. Because I believe that for us to be compassionate, to feel compassion for other people, we have to also practice it with ourselves.
Right.
And in this COVID roundabout that we don't know whether we're going to the left, to the right, in circles, our bodies are starting to feel the toll of these constant shift in direction and constant running in circles. And in our own workspaces, we don't know exactly what's going to come next. We're trying to adapt to what came yesterday, but there's more coming tomorrow. So all of these takes a toll in our bodies. And I want to turn to Bob to explain, how do we as individuals cope with this at a personal level, and what are the signs that we should be watching?
Thank you, Monica. Joel has described very well what we have all been experiencing for the last year and a half. And the truth of the matter is life has been bringing difficulties and challenges, stress and anxiety all along the way, but certainly has intensified over the last year and a half with the pandemic. Again, stress, anxiety, anticipation of loss, fear of losing our life or our loved ones, and some of us have experienced the loss of life. So with all of this going on, we can expect that this is going to show up in different ways within us. And if you look at it from a trichotomous point of view, we are mind, body, and spirit. And all of this stress and all of this anxiety, anticipation of loss or loss is going to show up in these areas. We can expect that in our minds, we're going to be impacted. And the impact may look like forgetfulness. It may look like difficulty making decisions, confusion. Mentally, it's going to impact us. Physically, in our bodies, we will be impacted by this kind of stress and anxiety, anticipation of loss. Sometimes people experience ulcers, high blood pressure, weight loss, weight gain. Physically, you may experience rashes and hives. There are a lot of different ways that this may come up. Some may experience headaches and certain pains in body parts like the chest. But people will also experience it deep within their spirit. This is a place that's right at the core of who we are. It's deeper than our minds, deeper than our bodies. And you may have a sense of hopelessness or helplessness, a lack of peace, deep, deep loneliness, feelings of being lost. So all of this that we've experienced over the last year and a half, plus other things that life has brought our way, will work its way out within our mind, our body, and our spirit.
Thank you, Bob. We want the audience to use the chat box to communicate with us and just take a moment to think, how has this time of COVID affected you personally? You know, I myself, one of the things that I missed the most are hugs. I really long for being able, have the opportunity to hug everybody, ask for permission before I hug, but I really long for that. And so we have the audience saying, accepting that sometimes it's hard to validate others people's feelings when they stand so different from one's own, particularly with safety. I feel like I am more concerned for my family's well-being than my siblings who refuse to take extra precautions. That's another layer of complication to this roundabout that you know, not all of us agree on which direction we should go. So this is not an easy path, and we can only imagine how that affects us physically, in our bodies, in our mind, that we can't shift the thinking from thinking about that, and probably causing feelings of sadness. Bob, I don't know if you want to comment to that.
Yeah, it does make it, this makes it especially difficult when there's so much confusion. Agreeing on one particular route for yourself, and others, close family, disagreeing and taking a different route. It is exceptionally challenging.
Right. We have another participant that says, I didn't realize how much comfort eating I was doing. And it was probably good self-care, John. You know, we have to practice self-care, and sometimes that's comfort eating. And there's another participant that says, I have learned to take better care of myself, both physically and mentally, because I have to be well in order to help others. That's a beautiful, beautiful thought, Kay. That this is one of the silver linings of what we are going through, that we are actually learning to take better care of ourselves. And we're going to turn to Sharon, because she has a few great ideas to share with us about how we can find the silver linings in this COVID roundabout.
Thank you, Monica. I appreciate your introduction. Our response to COVID has taught us so much about how to nurture relational connections, even in situations when those relationships require us to maintain a physical distance from each other. And so one of the things that I want us to think about today a little bit is how we do that not just in the COVID experience, but in so many other experiences that we face in our lives. We've, you know, throughout this time, this time in the pandemic, we've heard the term from early on about social distancing and the importance of social distancing in order to maintain safety. But I found that from the start of using that term, I had a very negative reaction, because I recognized that as humans, we're social beings. And so the idea of distancing socially from those that I care about, from my friends, my coworkers, my family, was very difficult. I yearn for relational connections. I don't want to be socially distanced. So from the very earliest days, I found myself rejecting that term and instead talking about how we can, in safe ways, maintain physical distance while still remaining relationally and socially connected. We know that well before COVID, many among us experienced feelings and issues of loneliness and isolation. In 2019, the health insurer Cigna engaged in research which indicated that 3 in 5 Americans stated that they felt lonely, left out, poorly understood, or lacking companionship. So these experiences of isolation aren't necessarily new. COVID has helped us in a powerful way to deal with some of those feelings, those experiences of being isolated. I like to use the acronym HUGS and talk about how we have learned to hug each other without necessarily being physically connected. We've engaged in activities to learn how to hold one another's hearts, how to understand another's needs, how to give oneself to another, how to support each other mutually and with intentionality in ways that allow us to maintain a connection even when we need to be safely distanced from one another. I want to talk a little bit about what some of those experiences might be in our life where we find ourselves needing to deal with this reality. Certainly dealing with a global pandemic is one of them, but there are so many others. The death of a loved one, that creates times when we find that we are in the midst of ground moving experiences. Divorce or loss of primary custody of children, transitions in the lives of our adult children, job transitions, geographical relocation. These are all experiences where the ground moves in our lives and we find ourselves looking for ways to connect relationally when there is physical distance between us. There's lots of things that we've learned throughout this pandemic, that lots of things we've put into place to work at dealing with these feelings and experiences of disconnection and isolation. And maybe you all have some ideas. I'd invite you to share those. If you do, I'm going to share a few, but you may want to share in the chat box some ideas that have worked for you. Some things that I've been aware of either doing myself or other friends have shared. Things like starting a virtual book club, or choosing something that people choosing something they can do together while in different places, like try a new recipe and do that together as they're remotely connected in a virtual way. Some friends of mine shared about doing a story time once a week with a niece and nephew who live at a distance, and that it was during COVID that they began to establish that tradition with their children. Hosting virtual game nights. We here at Coastal Hospice have started a Zoom bingo that we do together, and that's been great fun and a way to help colleagues stay connected outside the workplace, but without ever having to leave their own homes, something we've enjoyed very much. I see that one of you in the chat box talks about taking walks with neighbors and friends in the neighborhood, stopping to talk to others along the way. Sometimes it's helped us establish relationships in ways that maybe we didn't take the time to do before, as we've been doing some of those things. Our other things that we may do in the workplace to think about, specifically the workplace, to think about hugs, and recognizing that that acronym maybe stretches a little for our workplace, but things like doing a coffee clutch or a happy hour with colleagues. We here at our offices have put out gratitude pumpkins during the month of October and early November, and encourage people to write things on those pumpkins that they are thankful for, that they feel grateful for, just as a way of helping us continue to affirm and encourage positive things in our lives. We encourage the use of our cameras during virtual meetings. Just last week, one of our home team leaders provided sunglasses for everyone. And every time they went to speaker mode, they were encouraged to put their sunglasses on, and as a way of kind of, in her words, bringing us out of the dark and keeping our cameras on. So there are just so many ways, so many creative things that we can do, and we can carry these things with us as we learn both how to further live with the reality of COVID and in so many other areas of our lives.
Thank you, Sharon. And we have some ideas on the chat box that started a T for the soul card staff at the hospital. That's wonderful. John, I don't know if you want to type some more about that. That sounds like a great idea. A T for the soul. We should think about doing that as well. Taking walks with neighbors. I think you got that one, Sharon, from JG. And there was a comment earlier from Cheryl that said that her faith has been and is always the grounding factor for her, and that's wonderful too, because also the way we experience our faith, if you had a faith community, has changed, and we had to Zoom that portion. And Sharon, I don't know if you want to say something about that, how challenging it is, but maybe there's been ways that you have found that to bring closeness as you worship.
I think many of us in faith communities have found ourselves in the position, especially in more recent months, weeks or months, where we have some portion of the community being back in person in worship experience, while others are still joining in via some type of Facebook Live or some other YouTube after the fact. One of the things that my particular worship community has done that we found very meaningful is that immediately following the sermon time, it's part of our worship time that we do a talk back and we engage around whatever the topic of the day has been a bit. And so just as we are doing today, we encourage people to place their written chat comments in, while also others are being shared as part of that live encounter. And it allows people to feel like they're engaging together, even as they're in separate places. It's been a very meaningful way of keeping people in community and connected.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for that. There we have John sharing that at the hospital they have coffee, tea, and goodies, and material for compassion fatigue, anxiety, scriptures, information on the EAP. And he added stress balls. So I find these are fabulous tools and we should provide a place where we share these newly acquired tools with each other so that we can do some shared learning together as we go through these multiple roundabouts. So we've talked about the stress, but at the same time, the new ideas that we're finding to cope with this and how the stress has affected us physically, mentally, and spiritually. And now this is how we're processing a loss of the normal as we knew it and adapting to this new normal. Bob, I want to invite you to tell us, how are we experiencing these losses and at the many levels that we might be experiencing them?
Yeah, well, Sharon brings up some great points. And if you really hone in on what she's saying, our loss is always focused in at least one of three areas. I know we like to think of ourselves as complicated beings, and we are in some ways, but the truth is all loss or anticipation of loss or stress and anxiety can be reduced to at least one of these three areas, sometimes two, and sometimes all three. But what she talked about was the fact that we have been experiencing the loss of connection or love. Sometimes we anticipate the loss of love if we have a loved one who's terminally ill or chronically ill, or sometimes we have experienced the loss of love to death of a loved one. But one of the things that we've experienced through the COVID roundabout and through this challenge is this disconnection, and we feel a loss of love. We also, the second would be the loss of control. Uh, all losses can be categorized into loss of love, loss of control, loss of esteem. And we have certainly lost control during this year and a half. When we are told that we can't go out, when we're told that we have to quarantine, that we can't get together, groups are reduced in size if they're able to meet at all. Loss of control is certainly rises up and impacts us in some very real ways. And one of the things that Sharon is talking about is gaining control by doing these other things. You may have lost the control to do this, but you can do this. And it helps us to remember that we still have control over our lives. And then the last that I'd like to mention is esteem. And that has to do with personal identity. You know, who am I now that I can't go to work every day? Who am I now that I can't be in physical contact and relationship with my friends or family? Who am I as, you know, if I'm a patient and I have to have someone come into my home and take care of me and bathe me? You know, who am I? All of those questions begin to arise when we anticipate loss, when we're experiencing intense stress and anxiety. And one of the things that we have to be careful of is that we don't fall into the trap of what's known as toxic positivity. Either saying to ourselves or others saying to us, "Oh, you'll get over it," or "They're in a better place." It's not that those things aren't true, but the loss of love or anticipation of loss of love, the loss of control, and the loss of identity are real issues that must be dealt with. If they're not identified and wrestled with, and the feelings dealt with, then you can bet that there are going to be issues that one will face by not addressing them.
So Bob, what you're packing a lot in what you're saying right now, and what I'm hearing you say is we need to make room to experience some of this loss, and not
absolutely
with one another, because as we interact with one another during the day, somebody may be experiencing it more than we are, and we saying, "Oh, this will pass," or doesn't really create room for the person to experience what they're feeling at that point. And that probably only aggravates. That's what you're referring to as toxic positivity. Positivity generally could be a good thing, but it's not a good thing when it's hindering the ability of somebody else to experience the loss that they're feeling. That's right.
That's right. And I see that Cheryl had mentioned loss of purpose. Interestingly, purpose is wrapped up in identity. My purpose is part of who I am. So if you are experiencing a loss of purpose, if you follow that and drill down into it, you will find that you are experiencing a crisis in identity. Love, control, and identity will be the three that need to be investigated, looked into. Be self-aware about these things. Anytime we go through crisis, tragedy, the anticipation of loss and loss.
Right, and sort of as we are traveling, I feel that, you know, we lose some things and we've gained other things. So it's part of the journey that we're experiencing. And to Cheryl, maybe I think the loss of purpose is absolutely another loss, but maybe there will be a new purpose emerging somewhere. And I don't want to be doing toxic positivity this very moment as I say that. But we do want to provide the audience some additional tools about how to navigate in this new gigantic adaptation that we're doing to the new normal. And I'm going to invite Howard to talk to us about some thoughts that he's developed in having worked with grief for numerous years.
Thank you, Monica. Like many of you, I've experienced a lot of losses in the past nearly 2 years, 8 physical losses to death and many other losses too during COVID. And I've developed 5 things that have at least have helped me cope with loss, which is what we're all talking about here today, when you feel like the ground is moving underneath your feet. And the first is to be kind to yourself and to others. And I know our colleagues have talked about that. And in order to be kind, understanding, and considerate of others, you must first understand the importance of obligating the same to yourself. We're all likely familiar with that term that's been used, self-care. Well, I equate self-care much like the instructions that you receive on a commercial airliner when the cabin flight attendant informs everyone that in the event that the cabin loses air pressure, an oxygen mask will descend, and be certain at that point to adequately fit your own oxygen mask before attempting to assist others. And you know, self-care is much the same. We're inadequate at effectively providing care and support to others if we're not doing that ourselves. And others have commented today, you know, whether it's receiving adequate rest and sleep, the proper nutrition, taking vacation, taking time off from work, the long walks that someone else noted, engaging in practices such as a daily faith practice or doing something else, or all of these things can help assist in this effort of providing good self-care. And when you learn how to take good care of yourself, you can then take good care of others. And I think sometimes we neglect to do that, and it has its effect upon us. And have fun. Developing playtime isn't just for children. When we play regularly and learn to have fun, we become more optimistic and we become more happy. We become more creative. We become more innovative. Our learning and memory is improved in that process as well. And we have a more heartfelt connection to ourselves and to others. And in the midst of that, we're more likely to thrive. That age-old proverb really is true. Our bodies heal with play, our minds heal with laughter, and our spirit heals with joy. I believe that we should work hard, but we should also play hard too, and take time out for ourselves and have fun. Secondly of all is adopting a positive attitude. A positive attitude can boost your energy. It can also heighten, I believe, your inner strength as well. It can inspire others, and it can garner the fortitude to meet life's most difficult challenges when they come your way. According to research, having a positive attitude can even increase your lifespan, and who doesn't want to live longer in good health? It can decrease depression, it can reduce levels of distress, it can improve your psychological and your physical well-being. A positive attitude can help turn your life's challenges into opportunities. And thirdly of all, pursue your passion. You know, we're all enthusiastic and we're passionate, I believe, about something, but we all have something that makes us feel alive, something that gives us a sense of fulfillment, of purpose. Passion is that life energy that fills us with anticipation and expectation of greater things to come. So I would encourage you today, ask yourself, Is what you're doing in life giving you life, or is it draining life from you? Are you merely surviving? Are you kind of just going through the motions? Or are you thriving at what you're doing? Because a more passionate you is a more powerful you. So I encourage you, what is your passion? Pursue your passion. And number 4, be gracious and forgiving. You know, we've all heard it said that hanging on to unforgiveness, bitterness, and anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You know, life isn't always kind, and sometimes neither are others. Forgiveness isn't necessarily what we do for them. Forgiveness is what we do for ourselves. And what I've come to learn is that forgiveness is a choice. Forgiveness is a choice. And so by learning to forgive others, you're in control in a healthy way. And over time, a lifestyle of forgiveness can then begin to produce a healthier, a more happier you. So if you haven't developed that characteristic of life of being forgiving, I encourage you to do that. And finally, number 5, be grateful. You know, we're quickly approaching the Thanksgiving season, but you know, we don't need a holiday once a year to remind us to be grateful people. Some are familiar with the term Thanksgiving. It's a term that's used to express the daily attribute of gratitude and appreciation. Continually living in daily practice as a grateful person. Thanksgiving improves your self-esteem. It increases your mental strength. It fosters some resilience too. Developing this attitude of gratitude and this lifestyle of Thanksgiving can make you a whole lot better at everything you do, particularly when you feel like the ground is moving underneath your feet.
Thank you, Howard. And we have a comment from Cheryl saying that laughter is important, just like medicine, so are hobbies that we can cultivate. I had a question because you talked about a positive outlook, and what I think we have sometimes is people who get in the mental frame of being negative. Do you have any thoughts as to how to break that pattern of always seeing what is not there rather than seeing what is there?
Well, research shows us that if we can find at least 5 things in life to be grateful for, we can be more healthier, happier people. It may be just that, hey, the sun's shining today, or I heard a bird sing outside my window this morning, or, you know, if we can find even the most simplest, littlest things to be thankful and grateful for, when we develop that within us, then it's reflected in what we say and what we do. And not that we're giving into, as Bob said, this toxic positivity. I think we're realistic about it, but we choose not to remain there. We choose to set our sights higher, and we choose not to stay on this plane of negativity where we're constantly looking at the glass half empty or empty, but full. And I believe that life's too short not to be happy. And life's too short not to have that attitude of gratitude and appreciation for every single day. That's why we call it the present, because it's a present to us.
That's beautiful. And I sort of read someplace that happy people are also grateful. And probably that makes the difference between being unhappy and happy, that you practice being grateful for what you have. So for the message that I got, how to break the negative pattern, I'm thinking maybe do a gratitude journal. And first, we probably, all of us should have that somehow at some point during the day, count our blessings. Happy people don't have the best of everything. They make the best of everything. I love that, Kay. Thank you for that thought. It's a choice, really, then. It is a choice if we can recognize that we have it. And I also love what you said about play, that playing more as adults, we definitely need to do that. So these are great tools, and I love that the participants are using the chat box. Please don't stop using it. We want to make this as interactive as possible. To wrap these tools that we've been sharing in sort of this framework of how to process the losses and how to come to the other side of, we're coming from the old normal, going to the new normal, and we're providing you hopefully a bridge to get to the other side. The last 3 pillars of this bridge that we're building with you are going to be mentioned by Bob right now. So Bob, tell us, how are the last 3 pillars of our bridge?
So Howard brings up some great points and great mindsets to achieve and to lock on to. I will say that I've always found it more helpful not to do this all alone. There's certainly work that I can do on my own, but all alone, for me, it would be impossible. And I find the same for most people. When I've counseled people, typically after I recognize that their mind, body, and spirit, and I identify how the stress is impacting them, and we talk about love, control, and esteem, and the ways that they operate, and look at that, then I begin to look for areas of support, and I look for areas of support in my own life, and I look for, and I encourage others to identify their confidants. The confidant, I'm sad to say that most of us will go to the end of our lives being able to count probably on one hand the confidants in our lives. They are the ones who know everything about us and still love us. They may find out something new and it never changes their mind. They've been with us through thick and thin. They don't necessarily have to be blood relative. They could just be that person that you connect with. I would say identify your confidants and connect with them for support in helping achieve these mindsets. And after you identify your confidants, I would say, and I know I'm kind of breaking this down into very small points, but it just helps us to remember where we can get support. The next would be our constituents, which is a political term. A politician is looking for constituents that they can all agree on something that needs to be accomplished and attained, a goal to achieve. Identify your constituents, and that can be one person, that can be a group of people that helps you achieve and attain the goals of an appropriate mindset, of experiencing some joy. Constituent can be a faith group that you connect with, and you really get a sense of uplifting by connecting with them, and the positive words and the affirmation, the support. Look for your constituents during this time and going forward when facing anxiety and stress. Who is the person or who are the groups that you can stay connected with that help you attain your goals and the appropriate mindsets? And then the last, I would say, identify your comrades. Being a veteran, this is a military term. Your comrades are the ones that help you fight against things, fighting against deep depression and sadness. I once knew a lady who had experienced the loss of her husband, and she locked herself in her house for many weeks, and the weeks turned to a couple months. And she was friends with her neighbor. Her neighbor finally came over to her house, knocked on the door, and said, "Get yourself ready and get in the car. You're getting out of this house. We're going shopping and we're going to lunch. You're not going to sit in there any longer and just be miserable and isolate yourself." That might seem like a little pushy, but sometimes we need comrades in our lives who are a little bit pushy, a little bit militant, to help us fight against the things that we really don't want to take root and take place in our lives. And again, a comrade can be a friend, it can be a group. Sometimes homeowners associations are considered comrades because they fight against things within their neighborhood, whether it's crime or other types of issues that may be popping up. But it's very important that we recognize we are mind, body, and spirit. These anxious times will reveal themselves there, and they will touch on the area of love, control, and identity. And in order to get support, unless you want to go it alone and pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, look for your confidants, your constituents, and your comrades.
Thank you, Bob. We've been talking about self-care, and sort of also, I don't think it's self-care and is relying on ourselves alone. I think self-care is something we need to do in community after COVID. And this image is to entice everyone in the audience to know that yes, we need to take care of ourselves and get better at that and find what is good self-care for us, which is very individual to each and every one of us. But we also want to be responsible for caring for each other. We also want to ask ourselves, I'm thinking as I see the words confidant, constituent, and comrade, I'm thinking, who am I the confidant for? Who am I the constituent for? I need those in my life, but I want to be that for other people as well. And that's the image that we have of we're in this together. I think COVID is the one situation that has shown us that either we're all doing well or no one is doing really well in numerous ways. How can we foster in our organizations the creation of these types of relationships of confidence, constituents, and comrades? This is a great question for our panel. And I'm going to turn to the panel. Who wants to take this question? How can we do that? Bob, go ahead.
Well, I think one of the first things that we have to rally around is our just cause. What is it that's bringing us together? And at Coastal Hospice, we provide dignity and quality of life. And we provide dignity and quality of life to staff as well as terminally ill and their families. So the first thing we do is we recognize our mission. And after that, we build trusting teams, which means that this is where we get to the place of developing the confidants, constituents, and comrades. We rally around a mission together. We operate in integrity. We operate in kindness. And through that, that's how relationships begin to develop. A constituent and a comrade can easily become a confidant, which is the deepest level of these three of relationships. But if you rally around a just cause and you begin to develop a trusting team, then these kinds of relationships are bound to happen if you operate in integrity and in kindness. That would be my prescription for it.
Thank you, Bob. Joel, Howard, Sharon?
I was just going to add in that whole concept, how do we foster in our organizations? I think of the depth at which that question is asked, because as we said at the beginning, our organizations, and those are part of this, or those of who will watch this video later, each of our organizations are drastically different. We have different mission statements. We have different constituents and confidants and comrades that we rub shoulders with. But part of what I love about living on the Eastern Shore, and especially here in the Salisbury area, is how we do that together. Whether we're talking church organizations or community organizations or chambers of commerce, I mean, just everything. I love looking at papers and magazines and the ways in which we foster that. And again, it goes back to that image of the yield and yielding to one another and being compassionate to one another, even when we don't agree. And you can put whatever you want into that category. But I think it's just, and I thank everyone who's been a part of this today, not only on the panel, but who has been a part listening, knowing that you will talk about this with those that you work with. Because these are incredible concepts that not only have helped us in our organization and in our communities and our churches and in our places of employment, but we hope that they can for you as well.
Thank you, Joe. Sharon?
Yes, I'm reflecting back to how Bob earlier talked about loss of love, loss of control, and loss of identity. And I think there are very few of us that, as we have navigated these pandemic times, haven't experienced that sense that within our organizations, somehow individuals and sometimes the whole organizations have felt that sense of shifting identities or shift and a loss of a sense of control about how we carry out the roles within our organizations, or even the very work that we're called to do. We've needed to use different models, and certainly throughout healthcare, we've watched people constantly needing to shift and change the way they've done the work that many have done for decades. I think all of that has required increased intentionality about this whole issue of building trusting teams. So for instance, I found myself in a situation of managing a team who was doing much more of, in the early stages of the pandemic, much more of their work remotely, much more through telehealth methods, where, you know, we're people that are used to in-person contact and being very connected to patients and families. So it meant that we needed to spend more time together as a team, reflecting on that experience, thinking through the impact that it was having on our own sense of meaning and worth and purpose and identity in particular. And it took a lot of intentionality in talking across the organization as well about when was the time to shift those expectations and begin to allow a bit more in-person care again. So I think many of us have experienced that, just that really increased need for intentionality and listening to each other carefully, and as we named before, with a great deal of compassion.
Thank you, Sharon. That's beautiful. Howard?
Yeah, and I was just going to piggyback off of everything they just said. And I would encourage those who are a part of this today to take this back to your organizations and say, how can we implement this now that we're adjusting to this new normal? What does that look like for our organization? And how can we support? How can we compassionately be there and support our mission and vision, and do that in an empathetic way and in a way that is nurturing, but also is helping to strengthen our organization as a whole. So I would just encourage those who are taking part in this today to take that back and have those strong conversations with your organizations and those in leadership and say, how can we make this happen? Perhaps what we've done in the past, you know, we can't do it anymore. How can we do it now in a new way, in a fresh way that will help strengthen our organization as a whole?
Right, and one thing to continue along the thought, one thing that has happened for Coastal Hospice employees is that our patients are coming for shorter periods of time and they are sicker than ever. And they need more resources, and we have a window, very small window, to provide all those services. And this is probably part of COVID, but it seems that before we at least had a week or two with patients, but now it's been reduced to 48 hours. So I think that's very taxing for our staff. And when we talk about how can we provide as employers better working conditions for our staff, in part, I want to personally go tell everybody that hospice is a benefit for the last 6 months, not the last 48 hours, and that it's really hard for the staff. And maybe this has happened in some hospitals as well, that you are really tired of seeing people that are delaying their doctor's appointment and sicker. So, but then again, we go back to this image that together, we're in this together, and we just have 1 minute to close our webinar. And just want to thank my panel. Thank you so much for playing with me today as we share these tools with our community that we love. And know that we are here for you. This is for our community. You can call us anytime. And I'm going to turn it to Lauren.
Thank you to all of our panelists, Joel Byler, Howard Travers, Sharon Hutchison, Bob Miller, and Monica Escalante for this presentation on a topic that may be relevant to many. And thank you to everyone who has joined us today. We hope this information was useful to you. To wrap things up, we ask that you take a couple of minutes to fill out this short survey. It's only 5 simple questions. Your feedback will help us bring relevant programs to you, your practice, and those you care for. When you click Leave the Meeting, you will receive a survey from Zoom. We will also send you the link to our survey in our follow-up email to you. This was a presentation from the Coastal Caregiver Academy, a program of Coastal Hospice. Our phone number and website are on your screen. We are here for you. Call us anytime. I am Lauren Blair, and again, this was a program from the Coastal Caregiver Academy. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.